Alright guys, we're back. Time for the next step in the process of building your animatronic eyeball system. Today we're going to put together the eyeball animatronic itself. I guess the important thing here is I'm going to build one for you. If you want to have a set, obviously repeat the steps twice. So in order to get started, there's a couple tools you're going to need. Depending on if you have 1.75 filament or 2.85, you need a drill with a drill bit that is that diameter of your filament or close to. Little Phillips head screwdriver, silicone adhesive. Personally, you can use any kind of adhesives. I like to use silicone because it's permanent, but you can undo it if you make a mistake. Shears, or any kind of wire cutters for that matter. X-Acto knife, pair of fine point needle nose pliers. They need to be fine point. Super glue or your favorite plastic cement. Rubber gloves so you don't glue yourself to it. Push-pull wire, which is 0.5 millimeters in diameter or 20 thousandths thick. I got it at my local hardware store. I'll link you to some down below that I found online that you can go get. Actually, I got these from my local hobby store. I think I got 5 rods for about $3. Not a bad price. Those are the initial tools you're going to need. Let's go over the parts. Other parts you're going to need. Your 3 servos for each eye. These are from Adafruit, but they are Tower Pro SG92R micro servos. You need 3 of those. Your eyeball base. Your 2 eyelids, your eyeball, your 3 pivot pieces, and your left and right lock. We have everything we need to put this together. Let's go through the steps and build one. First thing we're going to do is build our U-joint. So to do that, you're going to need your 3 pivot parts. You can see them there. And you're going to need some extra filament. That is either 1.75 or 2.85, whichever one you choose. Make sure when you print these parts out, you print the file that says 1.75 or 2.85 so that it matches. So once we have that, let's go and assemble this U-joint again. First step is we want to take the centerpiece and we want to drill out these 4 holes so that we can take our filament that we have here, mine's 2.85, and get a good tight press fit in each one of these holes. So using your drill bits that you have that I mentioned in the last video, start with a small drill bit and work your way up until you get a nice press fit into here. Okay, so in here, I'm going to take this piece. It's a nice press fit into that middle piece. Next step is to take your 2 end pivot pieces here and here, and we want to drill these holes out here so that it's a fit where it's not going to bind. A tight clearance, but you want it to be able to swing freely. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So let's drill those out. All right, so here's what I mean by a tight clearance fit. This in here. Notice how it swings, but it's not loose in the end here. Okay, let's go ahead and assemble these. So what we're going to do is let's take our bottom piece and we'll go in here, and it would only fit one way. So we go in here and we shove the filament in one side, and there we go. And you can take some flush cutters or some wire cutters and go ahead and cut that with a little bit of extra on the outside, just a little bit more than flush, like that. Do the same for the other side. Nice and easy to move. Take the other one and do the exact same thing. Press it in. If yours doesn't press well, you can go in there and add just a dab of adhesive to the pivot joint in the middle. Just make sure you don't get glue on the outside, or put some oil on there so that the adhesive doesn't stick these parts together. This one seems to be sitting okay. I would add glue if you're going to do this for something permanent, but for demonstration, the press fit works. My original ones, I used steel rods and epoxied those in, but we're trying to make this easy. So there we go. there's your U-joint. So I can go up, down, left, and right. Okay, that's complete. Let's move on to the eyeball. All right, so here's your eyeball. One thing you should probably do first, if you care, go ahead and paint this, put your pupil in, put your iris color in, paint it white. I went and took some red yarn and took it apart, sprayed some spray adhesive on here, and then laid fine lines of red yarn on here to represent blood vessels, and then sprayed it over with a clear coat and make it nice and shiny and make it a nice bloodshot eyeball. But artist interpretation, you can do what you want or just leave it like this, but this would be the time to do that if you want to color it or do anything to it. Okay guys, I'm not going to lie to you, this is probably the toughest part of the build here, is getting this loop on here. I'm going to try to give you some tips, but the key here is patience. You could do it many ways, but trying to do it on the cheap so people can do it, this is the method I decided to do. So go ahead and cut yourself a rod here. I probably got about 6 inches here. Take your needle nose pliers and using the very tip of the fine point, go to the end and do a sharp bend, 90 degrees. Grab it again, sharp bend, 90 degrees. Grab it again, and you want to keep this a very tight circle. Okay, so you have a loop like that. Now this is the tough part, but I'll try to make it as bearable as possible. So find your opening that you haven't used. In this case, is this one. Run the rod through the hole, the side that doesn't have the loop. Okay, so it should be on the inside. And what you're going to have to do is use your needle nose pliers to open that loop up and get it on that post. Okay? It took about a minute, but if you open the loop up and you shove it through and then you go pinch the wire with your needle nose pliers to close the loop back up, you should get something that looks like this. So this is now your push-pull here, and you've got your push-pull here for your eyeball. Okay, just leave those long and let those sit. Let's attach the universal joint to our eyeball. On our eyeball, you'll notice that I went in and put in a keyway on there that lines up strangely with a keyway on the bottom of your universal joint. That's to make sure that your U-joint lines up with your push-pull rods. So do it before you glue, do a test fit, and just make sure you got a nice press into the keyway. So mine fits in there. There. It's nice and you can't rotate it. Nice and locked in. Once you have that, go ahead and grab yourself some super glue or your favorite adhesive. Apply a dot in the middle and go and press that universal joint into the bottom. While we're waiting for our glue to dry, one of the things we can do is we can do some test fitting. So take your base piece here and your lower eyelid, and those two tabs should fit in these two tabs. Should be a nice sliding fit. If it isn't, use a razor blade and clean that up, but it should look something like that. Test fit there. And another piece we can test fit is the eyelid, which sits here. And we can put in the eye lock mechanism on one side. So if you hold that in place, make sure that the eyelid can move freely on that side. And take the other eye lock mechanism and put that in there. And just make sure if you press those into place that your eyelid can move without resistance. What will happen is the way these things are printed, typically this shaft here won't be perfectly round. So you may have to do a little shaving down to make sure that it's round and get all the clearances in there. If it binds up, you want to go back and go shave some of these parts down to make sure that they have nice clearances between them. So while you're waiting, go ahead and test that. Make sure that these parts all fit together. So like, always test twice, glue once. All right, so it should open freely. So that's what that side should look like. Just make sure that it moves freely. Once you've done that, you'll notice here that there's a hole here. This should be the size of your filament. So drill this out again so that it's a nice tight press fit. Next step is we need to install the servos so we can cut those push-pull rods to the right length. You'll notice here we have holes for 3 servos, and on most of these, because we had to put in clearance for the wires, you have one hole here for your screw that holds your servo in. They're the screws that look like this with the big flat head on them. I had to go through with a very small drill and clear those out. You don't want to make them too big that the threads won't engage, but you go in there and drill those out with a very small drill because they're probably pretty tight when you 3D print them. So 1, 2, and either one of these will work just fine. So go ahead and drill those out. The next step is grab one of our servos, and let's do the back one first. The back one comes in from the top. I've got clearance here for the wire, so we want this servo to be oriented this way. Okay? So drop your servo through the top, and if your tolerances are good, it should pop right in. If not, use a razor blade, clean it up. Grab your second servo, and this one is going to be on the bottom, so it's going to go in this way. Okay, show that again. So like this, sits in there like that, and your third servo is through the side. Pull the wire through, and if your tolerances are good, pops right in like that. Okay, for fit purposes, what we want to do is take our horn and on the back servo, go ahead and place it on there so that, and go ahead and position it so that it looks something like that. A little more light here. You want it parallel to the body of the servo, and this one up on top, what we want to do is take our servo and our horn, put our horn on like that, and place that back down inside. Don't screw them down yet. This is the purpose of this is to get measurements for those wires. So when you got the test fit in, you should have a servo horn that looks parallel to your servo there, and you should have a servo horn that's parallel to the body here. So why do we do that? Because we want to put the eyeball test fit on here and find out how long the wires need to be. So hopefully your eyeball is now dry. Once it's dry, you can use the push-pull rods to push the eyeball left, right, push it up and down, make sure things move freely. Great. So what we're going to do is, one thing we still need to do is, you'll notice on the bottom here, this hole, depending on which one you did, is either 2.85 or 1.75. Drill out that hole so there's a nice tight press fit again. And through the magic of the internet, we have a nice tight press fit. This is going to be our locating pin. So we can go ahead and take some wire snips and go. Nice press fit. Before you glue, which we aren't going to do quite yet, we want to go in here. Now note, let's get the orientation right. So you got 2 wires. You want to make sure one of the wires goes back to this servo. This is your left-right servo. Okay, this one back here. Okay. And your other one, flip it over. I haven't tucked it in yet. This is going to be your up-down servo. This one's going to go to the servo right here. Okay. Let me tuck that wire in so you can see better. Top wire on top. Again, looks like that. Okay. And let's go press the pin on. Go. And look at the orientation. This wire here goes straight to this servo. Okay. Make sure this is square-ish. Okay. And the bottom one goes and lines up with the servo right there. Excellent. With your eyeball square to the base, so this piece here square to the base, make sure your eyeball is looking dead ahead this way. So you don't want it cocked this way or this way. You want it centered up. Look at where your wire intersects your holes. That's where your bend is going to go in there. So what we can do is take that. And first of all, the first thing you can do is take the excess, leave maybe a centimeter or two. Go ahead and cut that short. Check it again. There you go. We'll cut the rest in a little bit. There you go. It's about the right size. And this is a little tricky on the bottom. So same thing, except we're going up, down now. So with this not looking up and this not looking down, looking dead ahead, I've made this one way too long. So we already know that we don't need all this extra on the end. So for me, I'll cut that shit. There we go. That makes life easier. Okay, so we got the wire here. With this looking dead ahead, go underneath and see where the wire intersects the horn on there. And that's where your bend is going to go. Okay, so let's look at the top one again. This one's squared up. It's going to go about here. Looks nice and square. So with that squared up, I'm going to go grab the wire, grab my needle nose pliers, right where that hole is. I'm going to go put a 90-degree bend in there. I'm going to remove a little more excess wire. So you get where we're going with this. If I take this wire and put it in the far outside hole, and what I usually do is, so that it doesn't fall off, is I will go, now that I got the 90-degree bend, I'll go and bend it out. Square that back up. There we go. So you get like a Z. So you can take this horn off, and as an example, put the wire in the outside hole. It's like that. And place it on here. So you can look now, and even though the bottom one's not hooked up, I'll hold that one still. As I move the servo, we get left and right movement of the eyeball. Pretty cool. Now we need to repeat this same process for the bottom servo, which is a little more tricky because it's hard to get to, but repeat this same process. Hey guys, one trick to make your life easier that I just realized as I was doing this, since we haven't glued this yet, if you take the eyeball, and this is the bottom rod, okay, if we just rotate that bottom rod up to the top, we can take a servo and basically flip everything, just press it in like that, and with the eyeball looking dead ahead, we can go to the top here, and with the servo horn parallel to the body, we can get the exact location of where that hole is with respect to the wire, and we can bend the wire without anything in our way. And we will bend that up 90 degrees, like that. And then we'll bend it 90 degrees to make a Z. Take this off now. We got the bend. There we go. There's our Z. Trim off the excess. Okay, Okay, so now let's do a test fit. We gotta take the servo here, flip it back over. I found taking the horn off is easier. So now we know our left-right horn, we can put that on. Okay. And what I do is I usually put both horns on first. Okay, so you got both horns on. Hold those in place. We'll take this one down here, goes on the bottom. Push that underneath. This longer one goes on top. We'll push this into the hole here. Rotate this around. Put this back on the horn. Put the horn back on the servo. Okay. And this one's a little trickier, but we can take this one. Tuck that underneath. In there. Oop. You want to make sure that's parallel to the body, like that. Okay, and if we did it right, our eyeball should be looking straight ahead. So if I move the back servo, we get a left and right. And the bottom servo, this will be hard to get to, but I'll try. Move this one back to center. This bottom one, if I push it backwards, we look down. And if I pull it forwards, we look up. Perfect. So what we want to do is you can disconnect those horns and take some super glue. When you're confident, glue your U-joint to your body, making sure that you keep it nice and square. An easy way to glue this is, since you have the horns hooked up already, is because there's some slack in here, you should be able to take your universal joint and just pop it off there while still keeping the horns connected. Do that. Grab your super glue, a little dab will do you. Right in there. And go ahead and press that pin into the hole. Remembering to keep your eyeball orientation, where this one runs this way, your up down is at the very bottom. You don't want to have it rotated 15 degrees either way. You want them to be 90 degrees. So while you got time, straighten those out. Make sure things are square. Make sure that post stays square. That's very important. It'll stay square to the body. And we'll just weight this one out. If you got your eyeball on there square, you should be able to take your lower eyelid, clip that into place. One thing to test is to take your lower eyelid, put it into place on the clips here, and I can see that I have some interference. I can hear it on the front of this eyelid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sandpaper on the inside of this eyelid, and I'm going to go sand inside here and try to remove a little bit of material, and that should get me a good clearance. You don't want the eyeball to rub up against the eyelid, so go ahead and take out some material if you need to. For purposes of getting this video out on time, I'm not going to go in and sand all this, but if you move your eyeball up and down and you can hear it rubbing, go ahead and sand that. The same thing with the top piece. If you put the top piece on and open and close the eyelid, that one I don't hear anything. That one's got good clearance. So the bottom one just got a little bit of interference, which has to just do with printing, stack up, assembly. So go ahead and sand that and you'll be fine. So the next step is we have our eyelids. So we can look at it here. Ooh, nice. All right. So let's take that and test fit one of our eye lock mechanisms. One side. That works great. So what I tend to do on this one is I tend to use silicone on these two lock mechanisms, mostly because if I need to remove the eyelid to get to the mechanisms or anything like that, if I can remove these two locks, this bottom eyelid is just a press fit. This top eyelid falls off, so I can get to the eye mechanism, and if I ever need to repair it, it's kind of convenient. So I would recommend for the eye locks, if you can use a silicone adhesive, it'd be highly recommended. So what we're going to do is we'll silicone these on. On this face here, we'll apply some silicone. Okay. Put your eyelid on top. Lower eyelids in. Go ahead and slide that over. It should capture the shaft. And you're going to have to hold that in place until it gets a little tacky, which could take a while. So either tape it or put a weight on it, but we'll let that dry and we'll come on back. On the other side, we're going to use the other eye lock mechanism that goes in between these two parts. We're going to just do the same thing, use silicone adhesive. And here, put it between the shaft. Press that on. And you can hold both of them on or whatever you want to do, or put a clamp on it. So once you have those, while that's sitting there, you can test, make sure your eyelid opens and closes, which is good. You got clearance. I'm going to let that dry overnight, and we will finish this up in the afternoon tomorrow. So, and to you, it'll be about 5 seconds. Ready, set, boom, and it's tomorrow. So 24 hours has passed, our silicone is dried, our eyelid is still free to move. And now we can go look in here, and if we move the servo on the back, we get left to right movement. If we look at the servo on the bottom, so I can get to it, it's a little tougher to get to. There we go, up, down movement, we're good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, now that we got those in position, is we're going to screw the servos down to the base plate. These screws, not the screw that goes in the horn, but the screw that goes into the body. So go ahead and add those screws in there, and we'll be right back. So now I've screwed in the screws, you can see them there and there. Okay, so that should hold your servos in place, they shouldn't pop out anymore. Now we need to take care of the eyelid. So what we're going to do, this one's a little more arbitrary, but I'm going to guide you through it. Take your third servo, place the wire through the hole and out the back side, like that. Okay, you're going to press it where the servo shaft is towards the top. So we'll pop that in. You may have to shave a little bit off using a razor blade. Okay, that's placed in there. And now we're going to go put one screw in to hold the servo in place, just like we did the other two. Okay, put the screw in so the servo's locked in place. And what we want to do now is we just want to get this servo to open and close the eyelid. If you remember what I talked about a few episodes ago, you want to have the servo horn, when it's right in the middle of its movement, be parallel to the output arm, which is this yellow piece here. So the servo horn, you want it about where I have it, and you want the eyelid to be parallel to it. Okay, so it's halfway open. In this position, you're going to take another push rod, you're going to find the distance between the two, and you're going to bend two L sections at the ends to connect them together. I'll show you how to do that right now. So here's our eyeball mech, and remember what I said, when these are parallel to each other, the horn and the output, it's a 1-to-1 ratio basically. As this moves forward, this will move forward, and when this moves back, this will move back at roughly the same speed. If this were in this position, you can imagine a rod connecting between these two, right? A movement like this, there's very little movement in this direction, right? Most of the movement is perpendicular to the center of rotation. So the rod would not be pushed forward, so movement this way, you get very little movement of the eyelid. By having it here where they're parallel, all your movement, all your velocity of this point is in this direction. right? So that means your rod will get pushed forward, which means that this, your output arm, will close the eyelids. So that's why we want this orientation, okay? So step one is to go in here and make a Z bend or an S bend on the end of this rod. Let's do that. Bend. And like that. Okay, so we're gonna go over here. You're gonna put that in the hole and around, and you can see how that links up now. Now that that's in position up here, you can go down here, and when the output arm and the horn are parallel to each other, which they are, you can mark the spot where you should make your bend, which is right here where my thumb is. Grab right there and give it a bend. So we get something that looks like that. And I can use my shears and cut off the extra. So looks like that. So you can go on here. What you may have to do is you may have to take the horn off to get it to work, to get it to fit on there. Put this one through. You can go in, fish it through the very last hole on the horn, like that, and pop it back on like that. Okay, so now if we did it right, if I pull the horn one way, get the eyelid open, put the other way, we have ourselves a blinking eyeball. Excellent. So you have successfully, hopefully completely assembled the eyeball mechanism. If you're making two, you just duplicate this twice. One is enough to do the project. One thing I need to warn you, and this is extremely important for the next step or the next part, since servos have basically, you put in one input, you get one output. So when it powers up, it's going to go to a known position every time. Because we've moved these servos around manually, right? This servo head, when I power it up, could jump to that position. Okay, we don't know where it's going to jump to. So before you power these servos up, I recommend, and I insist that you need to take these horns off the servos. So take this horn off, take this horn off, take the horn off on the bottom servo and just let them dangle. Because when you power it up, these servo heads are going to move to a known position. And what you don't want to happen is have this hooked up, and then when you power it up, this jumps all the way here and past it and bends your rod. And you got to start over. Okay? So let the servo move to its known position, then put the servo horn back on and screw it in. Okay? So for now, we have our eyeball mechanism. Let's look where to plug those in, and we'll call it good. So here's your servo shield. The things you need to watch for are the labeled PWM, V+, and ground pins, and the numbers 7654, 0123. So each one of these is a controllable servo mount. You can hook up whichever servo you want to whatever pin if you write your own code. If you want my code to work with this program and this setup, you need to get the right servo on the right pin. So to follow convention, if you use my code, here's what you need to do. Pin 7, which is the far right one here, needs to be your left-right servo. Your left-right servo is this servo in the back, which makes your eyeball move left and right. Okay. So find your wire that goes from that servo, which is this one here for me. Plug that into pin 7. Yellow is PWM, brown is ground. So plug it in with yellow pointing up. Okay. Pin 6 is up down. So pin 6 is the one next to it, is the up down servo. Remember, the up down servo is this servo right here, the one that's upside down. So find your wire that runs off of that, which is this one for me. Yellow up, then on pin 6. And pin 5 is your blink servo. Remembering that your blink servo is this one right here. Okay. So find the blink servo and plug that into pin 5. If you have a second eyeball set, repeat the process, but here's your numbering convention. Your left-right servo, again, which is this servo here, needs to be hooked to pin 0, which is the top right one here, yellow pointing up, like that. Pin 1 is your up-down servo, which is the upside down servo here. Find your wire for that. Plug that in, yellow up. In pin 2 is your blink servo. So whatever wire you haven't hooked up yet, assuming you didn't mess anything up, take your blink servo, run that down, yellow up. There you go. So that's how your wiring harness should look like. And if you did everything right, then you can go in here and silicone glue your eyeballs to the base here, and your setup should be complete. Excellent work. All right, guys, so that's how you go and assemble and hook up your eyeball mechanism to your electronics. So if you're caught up to me so far, you should have your input mechanisms built. All right, we built those last time. You should have your eyeball mechanisms built. You should have your electronics built and assembled to your build plate. You should be able to hook up your input devices to your Arduino. You should be able to hook up your eyeballs to your Arduino. So at this point, all of your hardware should be built, and the last thing we need to do is the fun part, and that is the code. So I'm working on getting that together, commenting everything, trying to make it, the trick with the code here is I need to make it as simple as possible and make sure that whoever uses it, no matter who they are, it works. You can't have little extra numbers in there and stuff that work specifically for my unit. So I'm working on getting that together for you. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. I hope you had fun building the hardware. If you have any questions about the hardware, or if I skipped a step somewhere, it's always possible. Get me on Twitter. I'll put my Twitter handle down in the description. I'd be glad to answer any questions. If I missed anything, let me know. But hopefully all your hardware is ready to go, and you'll be ready for the code when I get it released out to the general public. So congratulations, good job, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.